Chapter 11 of A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Galen Darnell. A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder by James De Mille. Chapter 11. The Swamp Monster. A few joms after, I was informed by the Cohen that there was to be another sacred hunt. At first I felt inclined to refuse, but on learning that Alma was going, I resolved to go also, for Alma, though generally mistress of her own actions, had nevertheless certain duties to perform, and among these was the necessity of accompanying hunting parties. I did not yet understand her position here, nor had I heard from her yet how it was that she was so different from the rest of them. That was all to be learned at a future time. For the present, I had to be satisfied with knowing that she belonged to a different nation, who spoke a different language, and that all her thoughts and feelings were totally different from those of the people among whom she was living. She loved the light, she feared death, and she had never been able in the slightest degree to reconcile herself to the habits of these people. This I could readily understand, for to me it seemed as though they lived in opposition to nature itself. We went out into the daylight, and then I saw a sight which filled me with amazement. I saw a flock of birds larger than even the opkuks. They were called opmahera. They seemed as tall as giraffes, and their long legs indicated great powers of running. Their wings were very short and not adapted for flight. They were very tractable, and were harnessed for riding in a peculiar way. Lines like reins were fastened to the wings, and the driver, who sat close by the neck, guided the bird in this way. Each bird carried two men, but for Alma and me there was a bird apiece. An iron prod was also taken by each driver as a spur. I did not find out until afterward how to drive. At that time the prospect of so novel a ride was such an exciting one that I forgot everything else. The birds seemed quiet and docile. I took it for granted that mine was well trained, and would go with the others of his own accord. We all mounted by means of a stone platform which stood by the pyramid, and soon were on our way. The speed was amazing. The fastest racehorse at home is slow compared with this. It was as swift as an ordinary railway train, if not more so. For some minutes the novelty of my situation took away all other thoughts, and I held the reins in my hands without knowing how to use them. But this mattered not, for the well-trained bird kept on after the others, while Alma on her bird was close behind me. The pace, as I said, was tremendous, yet no easier motion can be imagined. The bird bounded along with immense steps, with wings outstretched, but its feet touched the ground so lightly that the motion seemed almost equal to flying. We did not confine ourselves to the roads, for the birds were capable of going over any kind of country in a straight line. On this occasion we passed over wide fields and rocky mountain ridges and deep swamps and sand wastes at the same speed, until at length we reached a vast forest of dense tree ferns, where the whole band stopped for a short time, after which we took up a new direction, moving on more slowly. The forest grew up out of a swamp, which extended as far as the eye could reach from the sea to the mountains. Along the edge of this forest we went for some time, until at length there came a rushing, crackling sound, as of something moving there among the trees, crushing down everything in its progress. We halted, and did not have to wait long, for soon, not far away, there emerged from the thick forest a figure of incredible size and most hideous aspect. It looked like one of those fabled dragons such as may be seen in pictures, but without wings. It was nearly 100 feet in length, with a stout body and a long tail, covered all over with impenetrable scales. Its hind legs were rather longer than its forelegs, and it moved its huge body with ease and rapidity. Its feet were armed with formidable claws, but its head was most terrific. It was a vast mass of bone, with enormous eyes that glared like fire. Its jaws opened to the width of 6 or 8 feet, and were furnished with rows of sharp teeth, while at the extremity of its nose there was a tusk several feet long, like the horn of a rhinoceros, curving backward. All this I took in at the first glance, and the next instant the whole band of hunters, with their usual recklessness, flung themselves upon the monster. For a short time all was the wildest confusion, an intermingling of birds and men with the writhing and roaring beast. With his huge claws, and his curved horn, and his wide jaws, he dealt death and destruction all around, yet still the assailants kept at their work. Many leaped down to the ground and rushed up close to the monster, thrusting their lances into the softer and more unprotected parts of his body, while others, guiding their birds with marvelous dexterity, assailed him on all sides. The birds, too, were kept well to their work, nor did they exhibit any fear. It was not until they were wounded that they sought to fly. Still the contest seemed too unequal. The sacrifice of life was horrible. I saw men and birds literally torn to pieces before my eyes. Nevertheless, the utter fearlessness of the assailants confounded me. In spite of the slaughter, fresh crowds rushed on. They clambered over his back, and strove to drive their lances under his bony cuirass. In the midst of them I saw the Cohen. By some means he had reached the animal's back, and was crawling along, holding by the coarse, shaggy mane. At length he stopped, and with a sudden effort thrust his lance into the monster's eye. The vast beast gave a low and terrible howl. His immense tail went flying all about. In his pain he rolled over and over, crushing underneath him in his awful struggles all who were nearest. I could no longer be inactive. I raised my rifle, and as the beast in his writhings exposed his belly, I took aim at the soft flesh just inside his left foreleg and fired both barrels. At that instant my bird gave a wild, shrill scream and a vast bound into the air, and then away it went like the wind, away I know not where. That first bound had nearly jerked me off, but I managed to avoid this, and now instinctively clung with all my might to the bird's neck, still holding my rifle. The speed of the bird was twice as great as it had been before, as the speed of a runaway horse surpasses that of the same horse when trotting at his ordinary rate and under control. I could scarcely make out where I was going. Rocks, hills, swamps, fields, trees, sand, and sea, all seemed to flash past in one confusing assemblage, and the only thought in my mind was that I was being carried to some remote wilderness, to be flung there bruised and maimed among the rocks, to perish helplessly. At every moment I expected to be thrown, for the progress of the bird was not only inconceivably swift, but it also gave immense leaps into the air, and it was only its easy mode of lighting on the ground after each leap that saved me from being hurled off. As it was, however, I clung instinctively to the bird's neck until at last it came to a stop so suddenly that my hands slipped and I fell to the ground. I was senseless for I know not how long. When at last I revived, I found myself propped up against a bank, and Alma bathing my head with cold water. Fortunately, I had received no hurt. In falling, I had struck on my head, but it was against the soft turf, and though I was stunned, yet on regaining my senses no further inconvenience was experienced. The presence of Alma was soon explained. The report of the rifle had startled her bird also, which had bounded away in terror like mine. But Alma understood how to guide him, and managed to keep him after me so as to be of assistance in case of need. She had been close behind all the time, and had stopped when I fell and come to my assistance. The place was a slope looking out upon an arm of the sea, and apparently remote from human abode. The scenery was exquisitely beautiful. A little distance off we saw the edge of the forest. The open country was dotted with clumps of trees. On the other side of the arm of the sea was an easy declivity, covered with trees of luxuriant foliage and vast dimensions. Farther away, on one side, rose the icy summits of impassable mountains. On the other side there extended the blue expanse of the boundless sea. The spot where I lay was overshadowed by the dense foliage of a tree which was unlike anything that I had ever seen, and seemed like some exaggerated grass. At our feet a brook ran murmuring to the shore. In the air and all around were innumerable birds. The situation in which I found myself seemed inexpressibly sweet, and all the more so from the gentle face of Almah. Would it not be well, I thought, to remain here? Why should Almah go back to her repulsive duties? Why should we return to those children of blood who love death and darkness? Here we might pass our days together unmolested. The genial climate would afford us warmth. We needed no shelter except the trees, and as for food, there were the birds of the air in innumerable flocks. I proposed this to her. She smiled sadly. "You forget," said she, "this season of light will not last much longer. In a few more joms the dark season will begin, and then we should perish in a place like this." "Are there no caverns here?" "Oh no, this country has no inhabitants. It is full of fierce wild birds. We should be destroyed before one jom." "But must we go back?" said I. "You have a country. Where is it? See, here are these birds. They are swift. They can carry us anywhere. Come, let us fly, and you can return to your own country." Almah shook her head. "These birds," said she, "cannot go over the sea, or through these endless forests. My country can only be reached by sea." "Can we not hurry back, seize a boat, and go? I know how to sail over the water without oars." "We certainly might leave the country, but there is another difficulty. The dark season is coming, and we should never be able to find our way. Besides, the sea is full of monsters, and you and I would perish." "At any rate, let us try. I have my sepet ram." "We could never find our way." "Only tell me," said I, "where it lies, and I will go by the stars." "The trouble is," said she, "that even if we did succeed in reaching my land, I should be sent back again, for I was sent here as a sacred hostage, and I have been here 4 seasons." But in the midst of this conversation a sound arrested our attention, heavy, puffing, snorting sound, as of some living thing. Hastily I started up, rifle in hand, and looked, and as I looked I felt my nerves thrill with horror. There, close by the shore, I saw a vast form, a living thing full 60 feet in length. It had a body like that of an elephant, the head of a crocodile, and enormous glaring eyes. Its immense body was covered with impenetrable armor, and was supported on legs long enough to allow it to run with great speed. It differed in many respects from the monster of the swamp, the legs being longer, the tail shorter and thinner, and its head and jaws larger and longer. I shrank back, thinking of seizing Almah and hiding. But I saw that she had already taken the alarm, and with more presence of mind than I, she had turned to the birds, who were standing near, and had made them lie down. As I turned, she beckoned to me without a word. I hurried to her. She told me to mount. I did so at once. She did the same. Scarce had we mounted than the monster perceived us, and with a terrible bellow came rushing toward us. Almah drove her goad deep into her bird, which at once rose and went off like the wind, and mine started to follow. The vast monster came on. His roar sounded close behind, and I heard the clash of his tremendous jaws, but the swift bird, with a bound, snatched me from his grasp, and bore me far away out of his reach. Away I went like the wind. Alma was ahead, looking back from time to time and waving her hand joyously. So we went on, returning on our course at a speed almost as great as that with which we had come. By this time the novelty had in part worn away, and the easy motion gave me confidence. I noticed that we were traveling a wild, uninhabited, and rocky district by the seaside. Before me the country spread far away, interspersed with groves, terminating in forests, and bounded in the far distance by mountains. The country here was so rough that it seemed as if nothing could pass over it except such creatures as these, the opmaheras. At length we arrived at the spot which we had left, the scene of the hunt. We could see it from afar, for the opmaheras stood quietly around, and the men were busy everywhere. As we drew nearer, I saw the vast body of the monster. They had succeeded in killing it, yet, oh heavens, at what a cost! One half of all the party lay dead. The rest were unharmed, and among these was the Cohen. He greeted me with a melancholy smile. That melancholy smile, however, was not caused by the sad fate of his brave companions, but, as I afterward learned, simply and solely because he himself had not gained his death. When I saw that there were no wounded, a dark suspicion came over me that the wounded had again been put to death. I did not care to ask. The truth was too terrible to hear, and I felt glad that accident had drawn me away. It was all a dark and dreadful mystery. These people were the most gentle, the most self-sacrificing, and the most generous in the world. Yet their strange and unnatural love of death made them capable of endless atrocities. Life and light seemed to them as actual evils, and death and darkness the only things worthy of regard. Alma told me that they were going to bring the monster home, and had sent for opkuks to drag it along. The dead were also to be fetched back. There was no further necessity for us to remain, and so we returned at once. On the way Alma said, "Do not use the sepet ram again. You can do no good with it. You must not make it common. Keep it. The time may come when you will need it. You are not fond of death." I shuddered. "Never forget," she said, "that here death is considered the chief blessing. It is useless for you to interfere in their ways. You cannot change them." Some more joms passed. The bodies were embalmed, and Alma had more victims to crown with garlands in the horrible Cheder Nebilin. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12 of A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Galen Darnell. A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder by James De Mille. Chapter 12. The Baleful Sacrifice. I resolved to go on no more sacred hunts. I was sickened at the horrible cruelty, the needless slaughter, the mad self-sacrifice which distinguished them. I was overwhelmed with horror at the merciless destruction of brave comrades, whose wounds, so gallantly received, should have been enough to inspire pity even in a heart of stone. The gentleness, the incessant kindness, the matchless generosity of these people seemed all a mockery. What availed it all, when the same hand that heaped favors upon me, the guest, could deal death without compunction upon friends and relatives? It seemed quite possible for the Cohen to kill his own child, or cut the throat of his wife, if the humor seized him. And how long could I hope to be spared among a people who had this insane thirst for blood? Some more joms had passed, and the light season had almost ended. The sun had been sinking lower and lower. The time had at last come when only a portion of his disk would be visible for a little while above the hills, and then he would be seen no more for 6 months of our time. This was the dark season, and, as I had already learned, its advent was always hailed with joy and celebrated with solemn services, for the dark season freed them from their long confinement, permitted them to go abroad, to travel by sea and land, to carry on their great works, to indulge in all their most important labors and favorite amusements. The Cohen asked me to be present at the great festival, and I gladly consented. There seemed to be nothing in this that could be repellent. As I was anxious to witness some of their purely religious ceremonies, I wished to go. When I told Alma, she looked sad, but said nothing. I wondered at this, and asked her if she was going. She informed me that she would have to go, whereupon I assured her that this was an additional reason why I should go. I went with Alma. The Cohen attended us with his usual kind and gracious consideration. It seemed almost as though he was our servant. He took us to a place where we could be seated, although all the others were standing. Alma wished to refuse, but I prevailed upon her to sit down, and she did so. The scene was upon the semicircular terrace in front of the cavern, and we were seated upon a stone platform beside the chief portal. A vast crowd was gathered in front. Before us arose the half pyramid of which I have already spoken. The light was faint. It came from the disk of the sun, which was partly visible over the icy crest of the distant mountains. Far away the sea was visible, rising high over the tops of the trees, while overhead the brighter stars were plainly discernible. The Cohen ascended the pyramid, and others followed. At the base there was a crowd of men, with emaciated forms and faces, and coarse, squalid attire, who looked like the most abject paupers, and seemed the lowest in the land. As the Cohen reached the summit, there arose a strange sound, a mournful, plaintive chant, which seemed to be sung chiefly by the paupers at the base of the pyramid. The words of this chant I could not make out, but the melancholy strain affected me in spite of myself. There was no particular tune, and nothing like harmony, but the effect of so many voices uniting in this strain was very powerful and altogether indescribable. In the midst of this I saw the crowd parting asunder, so as to make way for something, and through the passage thus formed I saw a number of youths in long robes, who advanced to the pyramid, singing as they went. Then they ascended the steps two by two, still singing, and at length reached the summit, where they arranged themselves in order. There were 30 of them, and they arranged themselves in 3 rows of 10 each, and as they stood they never ceased to sing, while the paupers below joined in the strain. And now the sun was almost hidden, and there was only the faintest line from the upper edge of his disk perceptible over the icy mountain tops. The light was a softened twilight glow. It was to be the last sight of the sun for 6 months, and this was the spectacle upon which he threw his parting beam. So the sun passed away, and then there came the beginning of the long dark season. At first, however, there was rather twilight than darkness, and this twilight continued long. All this only served to heighten the effect of this striking scene, and as the light faded away I looked with increasing curiosity upon the group at the top of the pyramid. Alma was silent. I half turned and said something to her about the beauty of the view. She said nothing, but looked at me with such an expression that I was filled with amazement. I saw in her face something like a dreadful anticipation, something that spoke of coming evil. The feeling was communicated to me, and I turned my eyes back to the group on the pyramid, with vague fears in my soul. Those fears were but too well founded, for now the dread ceremony began. The Cohen drew his knife and placed himself at the head of the stone table. One of the youths came forward, stepped upon it, and lay down on his back with his head toward the Cohen. The mournful chant still went on. Then the Cohen raised his knife and plunged it into the heart of the youth. I sat for a moment rooted to the spot. Then a groan burst from me in spite of myself. Alma caught my hand in hers, which were as cold as ice. "Be firm," she said, "or we are both lost. Be firm, Atam or." "I must go," said I, and I tried to rise. "Don't move," she said, "for your life. We are lost if you move. Keep still. Restrain yourself. Shut your eyes." I tried to do so, but could not. There was a horrible fascination about the scene, which forced me to look and see all. The Cohen took the victim, and drawing it from the altar, threw it over the precipice to the ground beneath. Then a loud shout burst forth from the great crowd: "Sibgu, Sibgan, Renenu, Hodu Likosk," which means, "Sacrifice the victims, rejoice, give thanks to darkness." Then another of the youths went forward amid the singing, and laid himself down to meet the same fate. And again the corpse was flung from the top of the pyramid, and again the shout arose. All the others came forward in the same manner. Oh, horrible, horrible, thrice horrible spectacle! I do not remember how I endured it. I sat there with Almah, trying to restrain myself, as she had entreated me, more for her sake than for my own, a prey to every feeling of horror, anguish, and despair. How it all ended I do not know, nor do I know how I got away from the place, for I only remember coming back to my senses in the lighted grotto, with Almah bending anxiously over me. After this there remained a dark mystery and an ever-present horror. I found myself among a people who were at once the gentlest of the human race and the most bloodthirsty, the kindest and the most cruel. This mild, amiable, and self-sacrificing Cohen, how was it possible that he should transform himself to a fiend incarnate? And for me and for Almah, what possible hope could there be? What fate might they have in reserve for us? Of what avail was all this profound respect, this incessant desire to please, this attention to our slightest wish, this comfort and luxury and splendor, this freedom of speech and action? Was it anything better than a mockery? Might it not be the shallow kindness of the priest to the victim reserved for the sacrifice? Was it, after all, in any degree better than the kindness of the cannibal savages on those drear outer shores, who received us with such hospitality, but only that they might destroy us at last? Might they not all belong to the same race, dwelling as they did in caverns, shunning the sunlight, and blending kindness with cruelty? It was an awful thought. Yet I had one consolation. Almah was with me, and so long as she was spared to me I could endure this life. I tried for her sake to resist the feelings that were coming over me. I saw that she too was prey to ever-deepening sadness. She felt as I did, and this despair of soul might wreck her young life if there were no alleviation. And so I sought to alleviate her distress and to banish her sadness. The songs of these people had much impressed me, and one day as I talked about this with Almah, she brought forth a musical instrument of peculiar shape, which was not unlike a guitar, though the shape was square and there were a dozen strings. Upon this she played, singing at the same time songs of a plaintive character. An idea now occurred to me, to have an instrument made according to my own plans, which should be nothing less than a violin. Almah was delighted at the proposal, and at once found a very clever workman, who, under my direction, succeeded in producing one which served my purpose well. I was a good violinist, and in this I was able to find solace for myself and for Almah for many a long hour. The first time that I played was memorable. As the tones floated through the air, they caught the ears of those outside, and soon great numbers came into the apartment, listening in amazement and in rapt attention. Even the painful light was disregarded in the pleasure of this most novel sensation, and I perceived that if the sense of sight was deficient among them, that of hearing was sufficiently acute. I played many times, and sometimes sang from among the songs of different nations, but those which these people liked best were the Irish and Scottish melodies, those matchless strains created by the genius of the Celtic race, and handed down from immemorial ages through long generations. In these there was nothing artificial, nothing transient. They were the utterance of the human heart, and in them there was that touch of nature which makes all men kin. These were the immortal passions which shall never cease to affect the soul of man, and which had power even here. The strains of love, of sadness, and of pathos were sweet and enticing to this gentle race, for in their mild manners and their outburst of cruelty they seemed to be not unlike the very race which had created this music, since the Celt is at once gentle and bloodthirsty. I played Tara, Bonnie Doon, The Last Rose of Summer, The Land of the Leal, Old Lang Syne, Lochaber. They stood entranced, listening with all their souls. They seemed to hunger and thirst after this music, and the strains of the inspired Celtic race seemed to come to them like the revelation of the glory of heaven. Then I played more lively airs. Some I played a second time, singing the words. They seemed eager to have the same one played often. At last a grisly thought came to me. It was that they would learn these sweet strains and put their own words to them, so as to use them at the awful sacrifices. After that I would play no more. It is a land of tender love and remorseless cruelty. Music is all powerful to awaken the one, but powerless to abate the other. And the eyes that weep over the pathetic strains of Lochaber can gaze without a tear upon the death agonies of a slaughtered friend. End of chapter 12. Chapter 13 of A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Galen Darnell. A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder by James De Mille. Chapter 13. The Awful Mista Kosek. The terrible sacrifice marked the end of the light season. The dark season had now begun, which would last for half the coming year. No more sunlight would now be visible, save at first for a few joms, when at certain times the glare would be seen shooting above the icy crests of the mountains. Now the people all moved out of the caverns into the stone houses on the opposite side of the terraces, and the busy throng transferred themselves and their occupations to the open air. This, with them, was the season of activity, when all of their most important affairs were undertaken and carried out, the season, too, of enjoyment, when all the chief sports and festivals took place. Then the outer world all awoke to life. The streets were thronged, fleets of galleys came forth from their moorings, and the sounds of labor and of pleasure, of toil and revelry, arose into the darkened skies. Then the city was a city of the living, no longer silent, but full of bustle, and the caverns were frequented but little. This cavern life was only tolerable during the light season, when the sun glare was over the land, but now, when the beneficent and grateful darkness pervaded all things, the outer world was infinitely more agreeable. To me, however, the arrival of the dark season brought only additional gloom. I could not get rid of the thought that I was reserved for some horrible fate, in which Alma might also be involved. We were both aliens here, in a nation of kind-hearted and amiable miscreants, of generous, refined, and most self-denying fiends, of men who were highly civilized, yet utterly wrong-headed and irreclaimable in their bloodthirsty cruelty. The stain of blood-guiltness was over all the land. What was I that I could hope to be spared? The hope was madness, and I did not pretend to indulge it. The only consolation was Alma. The manners of these people were such that we were still left as unconstrained as ever in our movements, and always, wherever we went, we encountered nothing but amiable smiles and courteous offices. Everyone was always eager to do anything for us, to give, to go, to act, to speak, as though we were the most honored guests, the pride of the city. The Cohen was untiring in his efforts to please. He was in the habit of making presents every time he came to see me, and on each occasion the present was of a different kind. At one time it was a new robe of curiously wrought feathers, at another some beautiful gem, at another some rare fruit. He also made incessant efforts to render my situation pleasant, and was delighted at my rapid progress in acquiring the language. On the jom following the sacrifice I accompanied Alma as she went to her daily task, and after it was over I asked when the new victims would be placed here. "How long does it take to embalm them?" I added. Alma looked at me earnestly. "They will not bring them here. They will not embalm them," said she. "Why not?" I asked. "What will they do with them?" "Do not ask," said she. "It will pain you to know." In spite of repeated solicitation, she refused to give me any satisfaction. I felt deeply moved at her words and her looks. What was it, I wondered, that could give me pain? Or what could there still be that could excite fear in me, who had learned and seen so much? I could not imagine. It was evidently some disposal of the bodies of the victims, that was plain. Turning this over in my mind, with vague conjectures as to Alma's meaning, I left her and walked along the terrace until I came to the next cavern. This had never been opened before, and I now entered through curiosity to see what it might be. I saw a vast cavern, quite as large as the Cheder Nebulon, full of people, who seemed to be engaged in decorating it. Hundreds were at work, and they had brought immense tree ferns, which were placed on either side in long rows, with their branches meeting and interlacing at the top. It looked like the interior of some great Gothic cathedral at night, and the few twinkling lights that were scattered here and there made the shadowy outline just visible to me. I asked one of the bystanders what this might be, and he told me that it was the Mista Kosek, which means the Feast of Darkness, from which I gathered that they were about to celebrate the advent of the dark season with a feast. From what I knew of their character, this seemed quite intelligible, and there was much beauty and taste in the arrangements. All were industrious and orderly, and each one seemed most eager to assist his neighbor. Indeed, there seemed to be a friendly rivalry in this, which at times amounted to positive violence, for more than once when a man was seen carrying too large a burden, someone else would insist on taking it from him. At first these altercations seemed exactly like the quarrels of workmen at home, but a closer inspection showed that it was merely the persistent effort of one to help another. I learned that the feast was to take place as soon as the hall was decorated, and that it would be attended by a great multitude. I felt a great interest in it. There seemed to be something of poetic beauty in this mode of welcoming the advent of a welcome season, and it served to mitigate the horrible remembrance of that other celebration, upon which I could not think without a shudder. I thought that it would be pleasant to join with them here, and resolved to ask Alma to come with me, so that she might explain the meaning of the ceremonies. Full of this thought, I went to her and told her my wish. She looked at me with a face full of amazement and misery. In great surprise, I questioned her eagerly. "Ask me nothing," said she. "I will answer nothing, but do not think of it. Do not go near it. Stay in your room till the fearful repast is over." "Fearful? How is it fearful?" I asked. "Everything here is fearful," said Alma, with a sigh. "Every season it grows worse, and I shall grow at length to hate life and love death as these people do. They can never understand us, and we can never understand them. Oh, if I could but once more stand in my own dear native land but for one moment, to see once more the scenes and the faces that I love so well. Oh, how different is this land from mine! Here all is dark, all is terrible. There the people love the light and rejoice in the glorious sun, and when the dark season comes they wait, and have no other desire than long day. There we live under the sky, in the eye of the sun. We build our houses, and when the dark season comes we fill them with lamps that make a blaze like the sun itself." "We must try to escape," I said in a low voice. "Escape?" said she. "That is easy enough. We might go now, but where?" "Back," said I, "to your own country. See, the sky is dotted with stars. I can find my way by them." "Yes," said she, "if I could only tell you where to go, but I cannot. My country lies somewhere over the sea, but where I know not. Over the sea there are many lands, and we might reach one even worse than this." "Perhaps," said I, "the Cohen might allow us to go away to your country and send us there. He is most generous and most amiable. He seems to spend most of his time in efforts to make us happy. There must be many seamen in this nation who know the way, It would be worth trying. Alma shook her head. "You do not understand these people," she said. "Their ruling passion is the hatred of self, and therefore they are eager to confer benefits on others. The only hope of life that I have for you and for myself is in this, that if they kill us they will lose their most agreeable occupation. They value us most highly because we take everything that is given us. You and I now possess as our own property all this city and all its buildings, and all the people have made themselves our slaves." At this I was utterly bewildered. "I don't understand," said I. "I suppose not," said Alma, "but you will understand better after you have been here longer. At any rate, you can see for yourself that the ruling passion here is self-denial and the good of others. Everyone is intent upon this, from the Cohen up to the most squalid pauper." "Up to the most squalid pauper?" said I. "I do not understand you. You mean down to the most squalid pauper." "No," said Alma, "I mean what I say. In this country the paupers form the most honored and envied class." "This is beyond my comprehension," said I. "But if this is really so, and if these people pretend to be our slaves, why may we not order out a galley and go?" "Oh, well, with you and your land, if a master were to order his slaves to cut his throat and poison his children and burn his house, would the slaves obey? Certainly not. Well, our slaves here would not, in fact could not, obey a command that would be shocking to their natures. They think that we are in the best of all lands, and my request to be sent home would be utterly monstrous." "I suppose," said I, "that they would kill us if we asked them to do so?" "Yes," said Alma, "for they think death is the greatest blessing." "And if at the point of death we should beg for life, would they spare us?" "Certainly not," said Alma. "Would you kill a man who asked for death? No more would these people spare a man who asked for life." All this was so utterly incomprehensible that I could pursue the subject no further. I saw, however, that Alma was wretched, dejected, and suffering greatly from homesickness. Gladly would I have taken her and started off on a desperate flight by sea or land. Gladly would I have dared every peril, although I well knew what tremendous perils there were; but she would not consent, and believed the attempt to be useless. I could only wait, therefore, and indulge the hope that at last a chance of escape might one day come, of which she would be willing to avail herself. Alma utterly refused to go to the feast, and entreated me not to go; but this only served to increase my curiosity, and I determined to see it for myself, whatever it was. She had seen it, and why should not I? Whatever it might be, my nerves could surely stand the shock as well as hers. Besides, I was anxious to know the very worst, and if there was anything that could surpass in atrocity what I had already witnessed, it were better that I should not remain in ignorance of it. So at length, leaving Alma, I returned to the hall of the feast. I found there a vast multitude, which seemed to comprise the whole city. Men, women, children, all were there. Long tables were laid out. The people were standing and waiting. A choir was singing plaintive strains that sounded like the chant of the sacrifice. Those nearest me regarded me with their usual amiable smiles, and wished to conduct me to some place of honor. But I did not care about taking part in the feast. I wished to be a mere spectator, nothing more. I walked past and came to the next cavern. This seemed to be quite as large as the other. There was a crowd of people here also, and at one end there blazed an enormous fire. It was a furnace that seemed to be used for cooking the food of this banquet, and there was a thick steam rising from an immense cauldron, while the air was filled with an odor like that of a kitchen. All this I took in at a glance, and at the same instant I saw something else. There were several very long tables, which stood at the sides of the cavern and in the middle, and upon each of these I saw lying certain things covered over with cloths. The shape of these was more than suggestive. It told me all. It was a sight of horror, awful, tremendous, unspeakable. For a moment I stood motionless, staring. Then all the cavern seemed to swim around me. I reeled, I fell, and sank into nothingness. When I revived, I was in the lighted grotto, lying on a couch, with Alma bending over me. Her face was full of tenderest anxiety, yet there was also apparent a certain solemn gloom that well accorded with my own feelings. As I looked at her, she drew a long breath and buried her face in her hands. After a time my recollection returned, and all came back to me. I rose to a sitting posture. "Do not rise yet," said Almah anxiously. "You are weak." "No," said I. "I am as strong as ever, but I'm afraid that you are weaker." Almah shuddered. "If you had told me exactly what it was, I would not have gone." "I could not tell you," said she. "It is too terrible to name. Even the thought is intolerable. I told you not to go. Why did you go?" She spoke in accents of tender reproach, and there were tears in her eyes. "I did not think of anything so hideous as that," said I. "I thought that there might be a sacrifice, but nothing worse." I now learned that when I fainted I had been raised most tenderly, and the Cohen himself came with me as I was carried back, and he thought that Almah would be my most agreeable nurse. The Cohen was most kind and sympathetic, and all the people vied with one another in their efforts to assist me, so much so that there was the greatest confusion. It was only by Almah's express entreaty that they retired and left me with her. Here was a new phase in the character of this mysterious people. Could I ever hope to understand them? Where other people are cruel to strangers, or at best indifferent, these are eager in their acts of kindness. They exhibit the most unbounded hospitality, the most lavish generosity, the most self-denying care and attention. Where others would be offended at the intrusion of a stranger, and enraged at his unconquerable disgust, these people had no feeling save pity, sympathy, and a desire to alleviate his distress. And yet, oh, the thought of horror! What was this that I had seen? The abhorrent savages in the outer wilderness were surely of the same race as these. They too received us kindly. They too lavished upon us their hospitality, and yet there followed the horror of that frightful repast. Here there had been kindness and generosity and affectionate attention, to be succeeded by deeds without a name. Ah me! What an hour that was! And yet it was as nothing compared to what lay before me in the future. But the subject was one of which I dared not speak, one from which I had to force my thoughts away. I took the violin and played Lochaber till Almah wept, and I had to put it away. Then I begged her to play or sing. She brought an instrument like a lute, and upon this she played some melancholy strains. At length the Cohen came in. His mild, benevolent face never exhibited more gentle and affectionate sympathy than now. He seated himself, and with eyes half closed, as usual, talked much, and yet with a native delicacy which always distinguished this extraordinary man, he made no allusion to the awful Mista Kosek. For my own part, I could not speak. I was absent-minded, overwhelmed with gloom and despair, and at the same time full of aversion toward him and all his race. One question, however, I had to put. Who were the victims of the Mista Kosek? They, said he, with an agreeable smile. Oh, they were the victims of the sacrifice. I sank back in my seat and said no more. The Cohen then took Almah's lute, played and sang in a very sweet voice, and at length, with his usual consideration, seeing that I looked weary, he retired. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Galen Darnell. A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder by James De Mille. Chapter 14. I Learn My Doom. Horror is a feeling that cannot last long. Human nature is incapable of supporting it. Sadness, whether from bereavement or disappointment or misfortune of any kind, may linger on through life. In my case, however, the milder and more enduring feeling of sadness had no sufficient cause for existence. The sights which I had seen inspired horror, and horror only. But when the first rush of this feeling had passed, there came a reaction. Calmness followed, and then all the circumstances of my life here conspired to perpetuate that calm. For here all on the surface was pleasant and beautiful, all the people were amiable and courteous and most generous. I had light and luxury and amusements. Around me there were thousands of faces, all greeting me with cordial affection, and thousands of hands, all ready to perform my slightest wish. Above all, there was Almah. Everything combined to make her most dear to me. My life had been such that I never before had seen anyone whom I loved, and here Alma was the one congenial associate in a whole world of aliens. She was beautiful and gentle and sympathetic, and I loved her dearly, even before I understood what my feelings were. One day I learned all, and found that she was more precious to me than all the world. It was one jom when she did not make her appearance as usual. On asking after her, I learned that she was ill. At this intelligence there came over me a feeling of sickening anxiety and fear. Alma ill? What if it should prove serious? Could I endure life here without her sweet companionship? Of what value was life without her? And as I asked myself these questions, I learned that Alma had become dearer to me than life itself, and that in her was all the sunshine of my existence. While she was absent, life was nothing. All its value, all its light, its flavor, its beauty were gone. I felt utterly crushed. I forgot all else save her illness, and all that I had endured seemed as nothing when compared with this. In the midst of my own anxiety, I was surprised to find that the whole community was most profoundly agitated. Among all classes there seemed to be but one thought, her illness. I could overhear them talking. I could see them wait outside to hear about her. It seemed to be the one subject of interest, beside which all others were forgotten. The Cohen was absorbed in her case. All the physicians of the city were more or less engaged in her behalf, and there came forward as volunteers every woman in the place who had any knowledge of sick duties. I was somewhat perplexed, however, at their manner. They were certainly agitated and intensely interested, yet not exactly sad. Indeed, from what I heard, it seemed as though this strange people regarded sickness as rather a blessing than otherwise. This, however, did not interfere in the slightest degree with the most intense interest in her and the most assiduous attention. The Cohen in particular was devoted to her. He was absent-minded, silent, and full of care. On the whole, I felt more than ever puzzled, and less able than ever to understand these people. I loved them, yet loathed them. For the Cohen I had at once affection and horror. He looked like an anxious father, full of tenderest love for a sick child, full also of delicate sympathy with me, and yet I knew all the time that he was quite capable of plunging the sacrificial knife in Alma's heart and of eating her afterward. But my own thoughts were all of Alma. I learned how dear she was. With her the brightness of life had passed. Without her existence would be intolerable. Her sweet voice, her tender and gracious manner, her soft touch, her tender, affectionate smile, her mournful yet trustful look. Oh heavens, would all these be mine no more? I could not endure the thought. At first I wandered about, seeking rest and finding none, and at length I sat in my own room and passed the time in listening, in questioning the attendants, in wondering what I should do if she should be taken from me. At length, on one blessed jom, the Cohen came to me with a bright smile. "Our darling Alma is better," said he. "Eat, I beseech you. She is very dear to all of us, and we have felt for her and for you, but now all danger is past. The physicians say that she will soon be well." There were tears in his eyes as he spoke. It may have been caused by the bright light, but I attributed this to his loving heart, and I forgot that he was a cannibal. I took his hands in mine and pressed them in deep emotion. He looked at me with a sweet and gentle smile. "I see it all," said he in a low voice. "You love her, Atem Or." I pressed his hands harder, but said nothing. Indeed, I could not trust myself to speak. "I knew it," said he. "It is but natural. You are both of a different race from us. You are both much alike, and in full sympathy with one another. This draws you together. When I first saw you, I thought that you would be a fit companion for her here, that you would lessen her gloom, and that she would be pleasant to you. I found out soon that I was right, and I felt glad, for you at once showed the fullest sympathy with one another. Never till you came was Alma happy with us, but since you have come she has been a different being, and there has been a joyousness in her manner that I never saw before. You have made her forget how to weep, and as for yourself, I hope she has made your life in this strange land seem less painful, Atem Or." At all this I was so full of amazement that I could not say one word. "Pardon me," continued he, "if I have said anything that may seem like an intrusion upon your secret and most sacred feelings. I could not have said it had it not been for the deep affection I feel for Alma and for you, and for the reason that I am just now more moved than usual, and have less control over my feelings." Saying this, he pressed my hand and left me. It was not the custom here to shake hands, but with his usual amiability he had adopted my custom, and used it as naturally as though he had been to the manner born. I was encouraged now. The mild Cohen came often to cheer me. He talked much about Alma, about her sweet and gracious disposition, the love that all felt for her, the deep and intense interest which her illness had aroused. In all this he seemed more like a man of my own race than before, and in his eager desire for her recovery he failed to exhibit that love for death which was his nature. So it seemed. Yet this desire for her recovery did not arise out of any lack of love for death. Its true cause I was to learn afterward, and I was to know that if he desired Alma's recovery now, it was only that she might live long enough to encounter death in a more terrific form. But just then all this was unknown, and I judged him by myself. At last I learned that she was much better, and would be out on the following jom. This intelligence filled me with a fever of eager anticipation, so great that I could think of nothing else. Sleep was impossible. I could only wait, and try as best I might to quell my impatience. At last the time came. I sat waiting. The curtain was drawn aside. I sprang up, and hurrying toward her, I caught her in my arms and wept for joy. Ah me, how pale she looked! She bore still the marks of her illness. She seemed deeply embarrassed and agitated at the fervor of my greeting, while I, instead of apologizing or trying to excuse myself, only grew more agitated still. "Oh, Alma," I cried, "I should have died if you had not come back to me. Oh, Alma, I love you better than life, and I never knew how dearly I loved you till I thought that I had lost you. Oh, forgive me, but I must tell you, and don't weep, darling." She was weeping as I spoke. She said nothing, but twined her arms around my neck and wept on my breast. After this we had much to say that we had never mentioned before. I cannot tell the sweet words that she said to me, but I now learned that she had loved me from the first, when I came to her in her loneliness, when she was homesick and heartsick, and I came, a kindred nature, of a race more like her own, and she saw in me the only one of all around her whom it was possible not to detest, and therefore she loved me. We had many things to say to one another, and long exchanges of confidence to make. She now, for the first time, told me all the sorrow that she had endured in her captivity, sorrow which she had kept silent and shut up deep within her breast. At first her life there had been so terrible that it had brought her down nearly to death. After this she had sunk into dull despair. She had grown familiar with horrors, and lived in a state of unnatural calm. From this my arrival had roused her. The display of feeling on my part had brought back all her old self, and roused anew all those feelings which in her had become dormant. The darkness, the bloodshed, the sacrifices, all these affected me as they had once affected her. I had the same fear of death which she had. When I had gone with her to the Nebelin, when I had used my sepet ram to save her life, she had perceived in me feelings and impulses to which all her own nature responded. Finally, when I asked her about the Mista Kosek, she warned me not to go. When I did go, she was with me in thought, and suffered all that I felt, until the moment I was brought back and laid senseless at her feet. Then, said Alma, I felt the full meaning of all that lies before us. "What do you mean by that?" I asked anxiously. "You speak as though there were something yet, worse than what has already been. Yet nothing can possibly be worse. We have seen the worst. Let us now try to shake off these grisly thoughts, and be happy with one another. Your strength will soon be back, and while we have one another we can be happy even in this gloom." "Ah me," said Alma, "it would be better now to die. I could die happy now, since I know that you love me." "Death," said I, "do not talk of it. Do not mention that word. It is more abhorrent than ever. No, Alma, let us live and love. Let us hope. Let us fly." "Impossible," said she in a mournful voice. "We cannot fly. There is no hope. We must face the future and make up our minds to bear our fate." "Fate," I repeated, looking at her in wonder and in deep concern. "What do you mean by our fate? Is there anything more which you know and which I have not heard?" "You have heard nothing," said she slowly, "and all that you have seen and heard is as nothing compared with what lies before us. For you and for me there is a fate, inconceivable, abhorrent, tremendous, a fate of which I dare not speak or even think, and from which there is no escape whatever." As Alma said this, she looked at me with an expression in which terror and anguish were striving with love. Her cheeks, which shortly before had flushed rosy red in sweet confusion, were now pallid, her lips ashen. Her eyes were full of wild despair. I looked at her in wonder, and could not say a word. "O Atam or," said she, "I am afraid of death." "Alma," said I, "why will you speak of death? What is this fate which you fear so much?" "It is this," she said hurriedly and with a shudder. "You and I are singled out. I have been reserved for years until one should be found who might be joined with me. You came. I saw it all at once. I have known it, dreaded it, tried to fight against it, but it was of no use. O Atam or, our love means death, for the very fact that you love me and I love you seals our doom." "Our doom? What doom?" "The sacrifice," exclaimed Alma, with another shudder. In her voice and look there was a terrible meaning which I could not fail to take. I understood it now, and my blood curdled in my veins. Alma clung to me despairingly. "Do not leave me," she cried. "Do not leave me. I have no one but you. The sacrifice! The sacrifice! It is our doom, the great sacrifice at the end of the dark season. It is at the Amir. We must go there to meet our doom." "The Amir?" I asked. "What is that?" "It is the metropolis," she said. I was utterly overwhelmed, yet still I tried to console her, but the attempt was in vain. "Oh," she cried, "you will not understand. The sacrifice is but a part. It is but the beginning. Death is terrible, yet it may be endured if there is only death. But think, oh think! Think of that which comes after, the Mista Kosek." Now the full meaning flashed upon me, and I saw it all. In an instant there arose in my mind the awful sacrifice on the pyramid and the unutterable horror of the Mista Kosek. Oh horror, horror, horror! Oh hideous abomination and deed without a name! I could not speak. I caught her in my arms, and we both wept passionately. The happiness of our love was now darkened by this tremendous cloud that lowered before us. The shock of this discovery was overpowering, and some time elapsed before I could rally from it. Though Alma's love was sweet beyond expression, and though as the time passed I saw that every jom she regained more and more of her former health and strength, still I could not forget what had been revealed. We were happy with one another, yet our happiness was clouded, and amid the brightness of our love there was ever present the dread specter of our appalling doom. These feelings, however, grew fainter. Hope is ever ready to arise, and I began to think that these people, though given to evil ways, were after all kind-hearted, and might listen to entreaty. Above all, there was the Cohen, so benevolent, so self-denying, so amiable, so sympathetic. I could not forget all that he had said during Alma's illness, and it seemed more than probable that an appeal to his better nature might not be without effect. I said as much to Alma. "The Cohen," said she, "why, he can do nothing." "Why not? He is the chief man here, and ought to have great influence." "You don't understand," said she, with a sigh. "The Cohen is the lowest and least influential man in the city." "Why, who are influential if he is not?" I asked. "The paupers," said Alma. "The paupers!" I exclaimed in amazement. "Yes," said Alma. "Here among these people the paupers form the most honored, influential, and envied portion of the community." This was incomprehensible. Alma tried to explain, but to no purpose, and I was determined to talk to the Cohen. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Galen Darnell. A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder by James De Mille. Chapter 15. The Cohen is Inexorable. I determined to talk to the Cohen, and try for myself whether he might not be accessible to pity. This greatest of cannibals might indeed have his little peculiarities, I thought, and who has not? Yet at bottom he seemed full of tender and benevolent feeling, and as he evidently spent his whole time in the endeavor to make us happy, it seemed not unlikely that he might do something for our happiness in a case where our very existence was at stake. The Cohen listened with deep attention as I stated my case. I did this fully and frankly. I talked of my love for Alma, and of Alma's love for me, our hope that we might be united so as to live happily in reciprocal affection, and I was going on to speak of the dread that was in my heart when he interrupted me. "You speak of being united," said he. "You talk strangely. Of course you mean that you wish to be separated." "Separated!" I exclaimed. "What do you mean? Of course we wish to be united." The Kohen stared at me as I said this with the look of one who was quite puzzled, and I then went on to speak of the fate that was before us, and to entreat his sympathy and his aid that we might be saved from so hideous a doom. To all these words the Kohen listened with an air of amazement, as though I were saying incomprehensible things. "You have a gentle and an affectionate nature," I said, "a nature full of sympathy with others and noble self-denial." "Of course," said the Kohen quickly, as though glad to get hold of something which he could understand. "Of course we are all so, for we are so made. It is our nature. Who is there who is not self-denying? No one can help that." This sounded strange indeed, but I did not care to criticize it. I came to my purpose direct, and said: "Save us from our fate." "Your fate?" "Yes, from death, that death of horror." "Death? Horror? What do you mean by horror?" said the Kohen, in an amazement that was sincere and unfeigned. "I cannot comprehend your meaning. It seems as though you actually dislike death, but that is not conceivable. It cannot be possible that you fear death." "Fear death!" I exclaimed. "I do, I do. Who is there that does not fear it?" The Kohen stared. "I do not understand you," he said. "Do you not understand," said I, "that death is abhorrent to humanity?" "Abhorrent!" said the Kohen. "That is impossible. Is it not the highest blessing? Who is there that does not long for death? Death is the greatest blessing, the chief desire of man, the highest aim. And you, are you not to be envied in having your felicity so near? Above all, in having such a death as that which is appointed for you, so noble, so sublime. You must be mad. Your happiness has turned your head." All this seemed like hideous mockery, and I stared at the Kohen with a gaze that probably strengthened his opinion of my madness. "Do you love death?" I asked at length in amazement. "Love death? What a question! Of course I love death. All men do. Who does not? Is it not human nature? Do we not instinctively fly to meet it whenever we can? Do we not rush into the jaws of sea monsters, or throw ourselves within their grasp? Who does not feel it within him, this intense longing after death, as the strongest passion of his heart?" "I don't know. I don't know," said I. "You are of a different race. I do not understand what you say. But I belong to a race that fears death. I fear death and love life. And I entreat you, I implore you to help me now in my distress, and assist me so that I may save my life and that of Alma." "I help you!" said the Kohen in new amazement. "Why do you come to me of all men? Why, I am nothing here. And help you to live? To live? Who ever heard of such a thing?" And the Kohen looked at me with the same astonishment which I should evince if a man should ask me to help him die. Still I persisted in my entreaty for his help. "Such a request," said he, "is revolting. You must be mad. Such a request outrages all the instincts of humanity. And even if I could do such violence to my own nature as to help you to such a thing, how do you think I could face my fellow men, or how could I endure the terrible punishment which would fall upon me?" "Punishment?" said I. "What, you would be punished?" "Punished," said the Kohen. "That, of course, would be inevitable. I should be esteemed an unnatural monster and the chief of criminals. My lot in life now is painful enough, but in this case my punishment would involve me in evils without end. Riches would be poured upon me. I should be raised to the rank of Kohen Gadol. I should be removed farther away than ever from the pauper class, so far indeed that all hope in life would be over. I should be made the first and noblest and richest in all the land." He spoke these words just as if he had said, "the lowest, meanest, poorest, and most infamous." It sounded like fresh mockery, and I could not believe that he was amusing himself at my expense. "This is cruel," said I. "You are mocking me." "Cruel? Cruel?" said he. "What is cruel? You mean that such a fate would be cruel for me." "No, no," said I. "But alas, I see we cannot understand one another." "No," said the Kohen musingly, as he looked at me. "No, it seems not. But tell me, Atem or, is it possible that you really fear death? That you really love life?" "Fear death? Love life?" I cried. "Who does not? Who can help it? Why do you ask me that?" The Cohen clasped his hands in amazement. "If you really fear death," said he, "what possible thing is there left to love or to hope for? What then do you think the highest blessing of man?" "Long life," said I, "and riches and requited love." At this the Kohen stared back, and stared at me as though I were a raving madman. "Oh, holy shades of night!" he exclaimed. "What is that you say? What do you mean?" "We can never understand one another, I fear," said I. "The love of life must necessarily be the strongest passion of man. We are so made. We give up everything for life. A long life is everywhere considered as the highest blessing, and there is no one who is willing to die, no matter what his suffering may be. Riches also are desired by all, for poverty is the direst curse that can embitter life. And as to requited love, surely that is the sweetest, purest, and most divine joy that the human heart may know." At this the Kohen burst forth in a strain of high excitement. "O sacred cavern gloom! O divine darkness! O impenetrable abysses of night! What, oh, what is this? O Atam Or, are you mad? Alas, it must be so. Joy has turned your brain. You are quite demented. You call good evil, and evil good. Our light is your darkness, and our darkness is your light. Yet surely you cannot be altogether insane. Come, come, let us look further. How is it? Try now to recall your reason. A long life, a life, and a long one. Surely there can be no human being in a healthy state of nature who wishes to prolong his life. And as to riches, it is possible that anyone exists who really and honestly desires riches? Impossible. And requited love? Oh, Atam Or, you are mad today. You are always strange, but now you have quite taken leave of your senses. I cannot but love you, and yet I can never understand you. Tell me, and tell me truly, what is it that you consider evils, if these things that you have mentioned are not the very worst?" He seemed deeply in earnest and much moved. I could not understand him, but could only answer his questions with simple conciseness. "Poverty, sickness, and death," said I, "are evils, but the worst of all evils is unrequited love." At these words the Kohen made a gesture of despair. "It is impossible to understand this," said he. "You talk calmly. You have not the air of a madman. If your fellow countrymen are all like you, then your race is an incomprehensible one. Why, death is the greatest blessing. We all long for it. It is the end of our being. As for riches, they are a curse abhorred by all. Above all, as to love, we shrink from the thought of requital. Death is our chief blessing, poverty our greatest happiness, and unrequited love the sweetest lot of man." All this sounded like the ravings of a lunatic, yet the Kohen was not mad. It seemed also like the mockery of some teasing demon, but the gentle and self-denying Kohen was no teasing demon, and mockery with him was impossible. I was therefore more bewildered than ever at this reiteration of sentiments that were so utterly incomprehensible. He, on the other hand, seemed as astonished at my sentiments and as bewildered, and we could find no common ground on which to meet. "I remember now," said the Kohen in a musing tone, "having heard of some strange folk at the Amir, who profess to feel as you say you feel, but no one believes that they are in earnest, for although they may even bring themselves to think that they are in earnest in their professions, yet after all everyone thinks that they are self-deceived. For you see, in the first place, these feelings which you profess are utterly unnatural. We are so made that we cannot help loving death. It is a sort of instinct. We are also created in such a way that we cannot help longing after poverty. The pauper must always, among all men, be the most envied of mortals. Nature, too, has made us such that the passion of love, when it arises, is so vehement, so all-consuming, that it must always struggle to avoid requital. This is the reason why, when two people find that they love each other, they always separate and avoid one another for the rest of their lives. This is human nature. We cannot help it, and it is this that distinguishes us from the animals. Why, if men were to feel as you say you feel, they would be mere animals. Animals fear death. Animals love to accumulate such things as they prize. Animals, when they love, go in pairs, and remain with one another. But man, with his intellect, would not be man if he loved life, and desired riches, and sought for requited love." I sank back in despair. "You cannot mean all this," I said. He threw at me a piteous glance. "What else can you believe or feel?" said he. "The very opposite. We are so made that we hate and fear death. To us he is the king of terrors. Poverty is terrible also, since it is associated with want and woe. It is therefore natural to man to strive after riches. As to the passion of love, that is so vehement that the first and only thought is requital. Unrequited love is anguish beyond expression, anguish so severe that the heart will often break under it." The Kohen clasped his hands in new bewilderment. "I cannot understand," said he. "A madman might imagine that he loved life and desired riches; but as to love, why, even a madman could not think of requital, for the very nature of the passion of love is the most utter self surrender and a shrinking from all requital. Wherefore the feeling that leads one to desire requital cannot be love. I do not know what it can be. Indeed, I never heard of such a thing before, and the annals of the human race make no mention of such a feeling. For what is love? It is the ardent outflowing of the whole being, the yearning of one human heart to lavish all its treasures upon another. Love is more than self-denial. It is self-surrender and utter self-abnegation. Love gives all away, and cannot possibly receive anything in return. A requital of love would mean selfishness, which would be self-contradiction. The more one loves, the more he must shrink from requital." "What!" cried I. "Among you do lovers never marry?" "Lovers marry? Never." "Do married people never love one another?" The Kohen shook his head. "It unfortunately sometimes happens so," said he, "and then the result is, of course, distressing. For the children's sake the parents will often remain with one another, but in many cases they separate. No one can tell the misery that ensues where a husband and wife love one another." The conversation grew insupportable. I could not follow the Kohen in what seemed the wildest and maddest flights of fancy that ever were known. So I began to talk of other things, and gradually the Kohen was drawn to speak of his own life. The account which he gave of himself was not one whit less strange than his previous remarks, and for this reason I add it here. "I was born," said he, "in the most enviable of positions. My father and mother were among the poorest in the land. Both died when I was a child, and I never saw them. I grew up in the open fields and public caverns, along with the most esteemed paupers. But unfortunately for me, there was something wanting in my natural disposition. I loved death, of course, and poverty too, very strongly; but I did not have that eager and energetic passion which is so desirable, nor was I watchful enough over my blessed estate of poverty. Surrounded as I was by those who were only too ready to take advantage of my ignorance or want of vigilance, I soon fell into evil ways, and gradually, in spite of myself, I found wealth pouring in upon me. Designing men succeeded in winning my consent to receive their possessions, and so I gradually fell away from that lofty position in which I was born. I grew richer and richer. My friends warned me, but in vain. I was too weak to resist. In fact, I lacked moral fiber, and had never learned how to say no, so I went on descending lower and lower in the scale of being. I became a capitalist, an Anthon, a general officer, and finally Cohen. At length, on one eventful day, I learned that one of my associates had by a long course of reckless folly become the richest man in all the country. He had become Athon, Melech, and at last Cohen Gadol. It was a terrible shock, but I trust a salutary one. I at once resolved to reform. That resolution I have steadily kept, and have at least saved myself from descending any lower. It is true I can hardly hope to become what I once was. It is only too easy to grow rich, and you know poverty once forfeited can never return except in rare instances. I have, however, succeeded in getting rid of most of my wealth, chiefly through the fortunate advent of Alma and afterward of yourself. This, I confess, has been my salvation. Neither of you had any scruples about accepting what was bestowed, and so I did not feel as though I was doing you any wrong in giving you all I had in the world. Most of the people of this city have taken advantage of your extraordinary indifference to wealth, and have made themselves paupers at your expense. I had already become your slave, and had received the promise of being elevated to the rank of scullion in the cavern of the Mista Kosek. But now, since this event of your love for Alma, I hope to gain far more. I am almost certain of being made a pauper, and I think I can almost venture to hope some day for the honor of a public death. To such a story I had nothing to say. It was sheer madness, yet it was terribly suggestive, and showed how utterly hopeless was my effort to secure the assistance of such a man toward my escape from death. "A public death," I said grimly. "That will be very fortunate. And do you think that you will gain the dignity of being eaten up afterward?" The Kohen shook his head in all seriousness. "Oh no," said he, "that would be far beyond my deserts. That is an honor which is only bestowed upon the most distinguished." Chapter 16.